website and app. And we'll be back here on Sports Extra 2 at 1:35. But we've got to change sport right now because we're off to Monaco and the Grand Prix Practice 1. Harry Benjamin, I'm guessing it's Harry there, and I'm guessing, what, did you get back in from your yacht party about 2 hours ago or not?
Oh, just about, Kevin. It's a hard life here in Monaco, I have to say, but we look forward to coming back. Have you got a yacht there out in the cricket or not?
No,
so
I got a canal barge, mate, but it's the same thing, really.
Exactly, each to their own. Well, we'll throw back to you on the canal after we've done our bit on the yacht for the next hour's session. FP1 just a few moments away. Welcome to Monte Carlo. We're overlooked by hills, and this is where we find ourselves in a small principality that plays host to the Monaco Grand Prix, described as the jewel in Formula One's crown. It won't take you very long to actually find some jewels around here. There are the £1 million yachts in the harbour as Formula One turns up, packed to the brim, filled with VIPs here to get their sights on 20 Formula One cars, threading the needle around just over this 3.3 kilometre racetrack. And it won't be long before we get some cars onto the circuit. Up in the commentary box is myself, Harry Benjamin, but our eyes and ears on the ground in the pit lane. Let's say good afternoon to Rosanna Tennant. Or not. No, we'll try and get Rosanna at some point, but in the meantime, up in the commentary box alongside myself is the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, and it's good to have some proper journalists around too. Scott Mitchell-Mahon from the race also joins me. Welcome, gents. Nice to have you up here. Just a few moments away then from the Monaco Grand Prix weekend fully kicking off, Scott, and, well, best weekend of the year, one of them?
It's certainly one of the biggest spectacles, even with the addition of so many new races, so many grand events on the calendar. You think of Miami and Las Vegas as two obvious examples. I think Monaco is still special. There isn't another place on the calendar where everything kind of feels on top of itself quite like this one. And I actually walked around the track quite a bit last night, and I've been coming here for 10 years in one form or another, and it still hits you in a unique way.
Were you doing that on the way back from a party, Scott?
I wasn't, unfortunately, and I'm glad I wasn't either, because the thing that I underestimate the most every time I come to Monaco is just how steep some parts of the surrounding area are. I wouldn't want to be doing that after a big party on a yacht.
Yeah, Thursday night can be a bit hectic in Monaco. The whole stretch from which we're sitting beside at the moment, from the swimming pool area right down to Raskas, is full of stalls and party goers and different sound systems competing with each other, people spilling drinks on the racetrack and probably some other stuff on the racetrack as well.
And that's just you in the evening.
Yeah, I was having a quiet night in Nice with producer Paddy.
That's Harry, not what producer
Paddy
said.
As you well know, Mr. Boat, Mr. Aston Martin Boat.
Hey, look, I was working. That's what I was doing. I was working hard.
You were meeting Adrian Newey for the first time, I believe.
Accidentally, yeah. We got the tender out, me and Rosanna, who we'll come to in a moment, got the tender out to Aston Martin yacht. They very kindly invited us on there, and I don't think we were supposed to be on that little boat that takes you out to the big boat, but then Adrian Newey and Andy Cowell both got on as well, so I think we had kind of interfered with their ride to the boat, but a nice little conversation. Of course, it is the first weekend that Adrian Newey will be on site, trackside, on the pit wall for Aston Martin. We'll talk about that as the session unfolds, but I think we can now check in with our pit lane reporter, Rosanna Tennant. Are you there, Rosanna?
I am. I've decided to come to work today, even though we did have a lovely evening courtesy of Aston Martin last night. That's down there. That's Lando Norris heading out into the fast lane of the pit lane, swiftly followed by his teammate and current championship leader, Oscar Piastri. Both drivers walked into the pit lane being trailed by the Netflix crew who are here following their every move. Lots of pressure on those two drivers, as you'd expect, Harry, but the scene is set, isn't it? It's such a wonderful place to go racing. You've said how wonderful it is. Blue skies, it's nice and warm. It is Monaco at its best as we get lots of track action now. Ferraris piling out, Lewis Hamilton leading Charles Leclerc out, and a lot of Flovis at the back of the Ferraris. So they're obviously having a little look at the rear wing. That is the 2024 wing we're expecting to see on the Ferrari, the rear wing that they used here, obviously to great success when Charles Leclerc took the victory for the very first time in his hometown. The Monegasque driver being the second driver from this wonderful principality to take the spoils here. So yeah, I'm excited for this weekend, Harry.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice little bit of stats and facts from you there, Rosanna. Louis Chiron, of course, the previous Monegasque to win around here. Charles Leclerc finally breaking that curse that seemed to be on him this time last year, having, well, set pole 2 previous times, had it again, and then finally was able to convert it into that race win as the cars do head out to the end of the pit lane and queue up ready for the green light. And actually, Scott, we've got a bit of a change for this weekend, because we know Monaco is all about Saturday normally. It is Super Saturday. Qualifying is amazing, but usually then you're not going to see much during the race. And last year we had a red flag right at the start, didn't we? And everyone then able to change their tyres and kind of manage their paces to the end. And we didn't see any good drama. But what's changed for this weekend?
This weekend it is a mandatory 2-stop race. The first time that they've gone in this direction, so you have to use 3 different sets of tyres if it's dry, if it's wet. And the reason for that is, as you say, everything kind of comes down to Saturday and qualifying here, and unfortunately the likelihood of a great, fascinating Grand Prix comes down to chance. And while this is a good place to go gambling, so I'm told, the intention with forcing a 2-stop is basically to stack the deck a little bit, add another variable into the mix and try and complicate things and trip the teams up, because the teams are incredibly well prepared and nothing catches them out more than experiencing a new variable for the first time.
So, no, does anyone really know what's going to happen? Because you try and talk to some of the engineers, some of the team principals up and down the field, and they are being a little bit coy, Andrew, aren't they? But are we going to see some absolutely bonkers strategies out there for maybe those who have got nothing to lose?
We might. That's the thing, Harry. I mean, look, this is not the first time Monaco's been a 2-stop. There was back in the 2000s in the tyre war era, or even after the tyre war era, this was a 2-stop race. The famous battle between Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in 2007 when they were at McLaren was a 2-stop, and there was a big argument about team orders that weekend between the two drivers, or between the drivers and the team, I should say. So it's not completely unknown, but what's different this time is that you are forced to do this because of trying to introduce a sense of jeopardy and a sense of uncertainty. And what it means, we've got, is that Charles Leclerc already up an escape road?
Yeah, I think it is.
Looks like it might be, is that
it's at the top, just before you come to the hairpin. Yeah, so Mirabeau managed to find reverse as Charles Leclerc, so I wonder if he's snatched a break and gone straight on, that he has brought out the yellow flag. While he does a bit of reversing, the yellow flag is at everybody slowing down, and Leclerc does get himself just back onto the circuit and then heads downhill towards the hairpin.
Yeah, so it might not change much, it might change everything, and it kind of depends on how the race unfolds. Some people at the back might take a gamble. For example, you could do your 2 pit stops on the first 2 laps, stick on the hard tyre and just go to the end of the race and hope that as the race unfolds you move up as other people make their pit stops, as safety cars happen and you don't have to stop. And of course people can't overtake you. There's no risk of having old tyres and being passed by people on new tyres after a safety car, because you can't really overtake them on it. Because that's one possible thing that could happen. The other thing that could happen is if in teams where you've got a number 1 driver and a number 2 driver, or a designated number 1 driver for the weekend, that driver, the second driver, backs up the rest of the field, so the lead driver can pit back into space and keep his position. All sorts of stuff like that. And of course the fact that there's one extra pit stop required means that under any safety car situation there's more difficult decisions to make. So I think it just adds an extra sense of uncertainty to the race, which a race that doesn't have a lot of uncertainty generally. The final point I would make, though, is it feels like a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to one extreme example of a Monaco Grand Prix. Last year what happened was that there was a first lap crash, and basically everybody stopped at the end of that lap, stuck on a set of hard tyres and went to the end. Because the tyres were marginal, Charles Leclerc in the lead just controlled the pace to make sure that they got to the end. And it was a very, very boring race. It's not normally like that in Monaco. There's normally a phase around the pit stops where positions can change, people are pushing suddenly, some people will overtake as a result of that. Sometimes there's rain, like there was in 2023, which was a fantastic race once the rain happened. Aston Martin basically dropped the ball on a chance to get Fernando Alonso's a win for the first time in 10 years by pitting the wrong tyres at the wrong time and having to come straight in again. So did they really need to do this? I don't know, but as Lewis Hamilton said yesterday, if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, the same thing keeps happening. So why not try something different?
Yeah, I think I'm of the opinion, Roseanne, I don't know about you, that I'm happy just to see something being tried, whether it works or not.
Yeah, I think so. And actually, the drivers were being pretty complimentary about the change during yesterday's media sessions, all sort of open to what the two-stopper might bring. But I was having a chat with Mercedes trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin, and sort of just wanted to find out how they were approaching this weekend. And he joked with me, Harry. He was like, it's going to be twice as difficult. And I was like, really? He's like, no, but it's more complicated. So many more permutations. And I said to him, I don't know if I love the idea of everybody piling into the pits on lap one. And he said he didn't think they're going to do that. Maybe the cars at the back might. So I think you've sort of alluded to it already. Maybe that's what people right at the back of the field might gamble on. But look, try it. If they weren't introducing it, I think a lot of us would be on air saying, oh, you know, it's going to be boring, it's going to be a procession. So it's that sort of, if the coin was being tossed in the air and it said, did you want it to be one stop or two stop? I think a lot of people would say, well, why not? Let's have a go. Let's have a two-stopper.
Exactly, and no one really knows what's going to happen, and there's the intrigue already to keep us hooked in this weekend until Sunday. But we are in the throes of practice one for now. Those who wish to do a sync-up, it's 54 minutes and 14, 13, 12 seconds remaining of FP1. Pretty much everybody out on the circuit at the moment, with the exception of Pierre Gasly, who has been out there and then come back into the pits. Fastest driver at the moment in these very early stages is Nico Hülkenberg in the Sauber, 1:16.5, but Lando Norris is fast as anybody through the first sector, and that is the sound you can hear coming through Tobacco at the moment. He's got a bit of traffic ahead of him though, and this is going to be such a factor, isn't it, throughout the weekend, particularly in qualifying, and it starts to close up through the swimming pool chicane. Then there's a short drag, it arcs slightly to the left. He's right behind the Alpine of Franco Colapinto as they come round the final corner. The right-hander Anthony Nogues, it tips you up and over almost as you then come onto the start-finish straight, which isn't even straight. And across the line though for Norris on that soft tyre, the Red Wall compound, a 1:14.989. A reminder that Pirelli are once again bringing that softer compound this weekend. The C4 acting as the hard, the C5 the medium, and the C6 soft. Brief yellow flag out on track, but we're back to green again.
And that C6 tyre, Harry, introduces a further question.
Oh, sorry, Andrew. Front wing damage for Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. That's why the yellow flag was out. He's got a front wing off, or half of it off, and a little bit caught under his car as well. He's still going, making his way very slowly through the tunnel. So Charles Leclerc, in these early stages, has had a coming together with the wall, which we haven't quite seen yet.
We saw, obviously, his incident earlier on when he took that trip down the escape road. And when we saw a replay, it was very much the classic early Monaco problem of just very little grip. He wasn't pushing particularly hard. He just caught that small lock-up and slid pretty helplessly deep into the corner. I would imagine he's had something similar that doesn't look like tripping up against another car, and he's going to limp it back to the pits. But he wasn't looking forward to this weekend. As much as he loves racing in home, he's worried about the Ferrari's low-speed performance, and that is not how he would have wanted his practice to have started.
No, it is not. If anything, that Ferrari's been rather inconsistent, although the race pace gave them something to smile about at least. But he's come into the pits, which is where we can find Rosanna.
Yeah, the mechanic's not looking too happy, I have to say, as they waited for him to pull in. He's just turned the engine off, and you can see there is just half a front wing there, and the right-hand part of it is currently being sort of joggled by the mechanic, technical word, trying to get it off. A little bit tricky there. Obviously, the balance is a bit off because he's only got one half of it to lever off. It is now off. They'll take that away, and the new one is being fitted straight away.
Oh, Rosanna, so we've just seen the replay, and he went into the back of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin, coming down into the hairpin, and then as he gets on the power, before he hits the brakes...
Come on. We crashed. I don't think he was aware about the blue flags.
So Stroll was well off the racing line on the inside, approaching the hairpin.
And Leclerc is there. I don't hear you.
That was Stroll just saying, I just felt Leclerc crash into the back of me. So Stroll had actually just got out of the way of one of the Mercedes cars. Yeah, we are underway at the Principality. One of the best weekends of the year, but it's not got off to the best of starts for the home hero. The man who took pole and won here last year, Charles Leclerc, in the Ferrari, has just had a bit of an incident with Lance Stroll's Aston Martin in the early stages, crashed into the back of him and broken his front wing. That's brought out a red flag. They've both made it back to the pits, but for the moment then, all cars having to come back into the pit lane, and that will be damage limitation for those wanting to get more track time before qualifying on Saturday. So red flag has come out. The clock continues to count down in practice. Stroll's made it back, and I wonder if Stroll wasn't aware that Leclerc was right there, but it felt a bit silly.
Well, so in a road accident, Harry, if you hit someone in the back, then it's your fault. But in this particular case, I don't think it was Charles Leclerc's fault at all. Stroll was on the inside of the circuit heading down towards the Lowe's hairpin, or it's not called the Lowe's hairpin anymore, but that's what I call it. So whatever it's called now, whatever.
Hairpin.
Yeah. And Leclerc was coming out of Mirabeau, the corner before, on a hot lap by the looks of it. And Stroll just turned almost like a right angle right onto the racing line, right into Leclerc's path, and he had nowhere to go. So I think it's pretty obvious Stroll wouldn't have done that if he knew Leclerc was coming. And that radio transmission that we heard was obviously the engineer warning him that Leclerc was coming and Stroll not picking it up early enough.
He'd obviously just let another car go through, so my guess would be from that is that Stroll is aware that there is a car coming, but hasn't obviously clocked the message that Leclerc's there too. We did hear his race engineer say that. He's let one car go, thought, okay, now I can move over and take my racing line, and Leclerc has nowhere to go. So take back what I said before. It did look like a head-on nose-first incident into the barrier. It turns out it was a head-on nose-first incident into the back of another car. You don't normally see that kind of accident in practice.
No, and coming into this weekend rather despondent with Charles Leclerc. That is not the way he would have wanted to kick things off, but fairly minimal in the grand scheme of things. Just getting another look at it, and it was just as Leclerc stamps on the brakes, but Stroll jerks out to the right in front of him to take the line into the hairpin, and Leclerc can do nothing.
The thing is, he has to come back to the racing line, because the problem with that hairpin is it's so tight that there's not enough lock. There's only just enough lock to get round it if you're on the right line. If you're as tight as he was to the inside, he was probably thinking, I'm going to struggle to get round the hairpin. I've got to go out before I go back in again. But he did it without looking in his mirrors, basically.
Yeah, he just let through what looked like Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes, and it looks very, very simply like Stroll, not expecting there to be a second car arriving on the scene, but that's exactly what Leclerc did.
Well, we should get this session resumed shortly, but before that, let's check back in with Rosanna Tennant.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri heading out already, keen to get his session back underway, and I'm just standing looking into Charles Leclerc's Ferrari garage, and when I was talking to you last, they were putting the front wings straight back on, but that then came off again when he'd been rolled back into the garage, and the mechanics were quick to get down on their hands and knees and have a look at what was going on underneath the car to be sure that there wasn't any extra damage. Another front wing has now been reattached, the tyres are going on, and I think they are going to be ready to send him out pretty shortly. All go now. This is exciting. A bit of action in practice.
Yes, straight away. Didn't have to wait long for that, did we? Race control session will resume at 1:44 local time, so just a couple of minutes' time. The red flag was out. The clock continues to chime down in practice. If it's qualifying, we would put a stop to it. Also, noting from race control, the incident between Charles Leclerc and Lance Stroll is will be investigated after the session. So we'll have a look and see what the FIA do on that one.
Sometimes I think the FIA is on a sort of email generation drive. You know, they have these investigations into things in practice, and every single time it comes back with no further action pretty much. Sometimes there's a mild reprimand, occasionally, very occasionally, a small fine. But it's just like, it's almost like they're a bit bored up there and they've got nothing else to do.
It's a tick in the box, isn't it?
The worst thing that would happen is if it's almost like you have to go through and just check the box for every single small incident, because you can't afford to miss the one big one that might happen every few sessions. The ones that I always feel the most sorry for are in qualifying, when there is a safety car like Delta time that the minimum time that they end up.
Why did they bother?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. They have to do it on the off chance that someone is trying to game the system, go extremely slowly, optimise their preparation for the qualifying lap, and every single time, without exception, it's a completely justified situation because someone is trying to get out of the way of another car or something like that.
Look forward to seeing that tomorrow in qualifying. Green light on at the end of the pit lane. We are back underway. It's 45 minutes and 48, 47, 46, 45 seconds remaining.
Now, interestingly, I've just seen Lance Stroll, because we get a view over the pit lane and the commentary boxes here. We don't have a lot of room in the box, but we do get a good view.
Cozy.
I've just seen him walk out of the Aston Martin garage and up the stairs into the engineering room above the garage. So I wonder whether that car's damaged as a result of the incident with Leclerc.
I wonder if a bit of the floor, of course, the gearbox as well, all located in the rear end of the car. Well, there is quite
maybe
important...
Maybe Rosanna could go and find out.
Yeah, Rosanna, there's your mission for you. Well, there is a rather important person as well sitting in that engineering room, which is where the pit wall is, really, because of the nature of the Monaco circuit. You don't have that traditional pit wall here because there simply isn't enough room. And Adrian Newey is here this weekend, his first visit on site for Aston Martin. Is that a power play, Andrew? Or what's he learning from being here?
Well, he's actually in the garage at the moment, looking very much like Adrian Newey always does, with his little clipboard and notebook and a pen in one hand, and taking notes and listening carefully about to what's going on. He's basically trying to embed himself in the team. He doesn't need to have a power play. He's the managing technical partner, and he's earning £30 million a year, or at least he will be if they win the World Championship. It's all part of the learning process. We had a few of us anyway, had a news conference with him yesterday, which I can't talk to you about right now because it's embargoed, but you can read about it on the BBC Sport website tomorrow morning. But he's been at the factory for 2 months, pretty much. He started work on the 3rd of March. That was the first Monday in March. He's dabbled with the 2025 car. There was an upgrade on that in Imola last weekend, which the way they're characterising it is having lunchtime meetings with the team who are designing the 2025 car to see what ideas he can suggest to them. I think actually he's done a little bit more than that on that upgrade, but they don't want to admit that. But he's mainly working on the 26 car, and this weekend is the first chance for him to experience at the track how the team works together. Of course, he's been dialed in to the team. He made it very clear he'd had a weekend off 2 weekends ago. He's obviously working very hard. And so it's about learning how the team work, how the drivers work, and giving some insight. Because one of the things about Adrian Newey that makes him such a powerful force within a team is he's not just a genius aerodynamicist. He's the full renaissance man of Formula 1 engineering, if you like. He does a bit of everything. He's a great race engineer. He's very intuitive. He understands what the drivers need to make the car go fast. So I think working with Fernando Alonso, particularly for the first time here in Monaco, those two particularly are going to learn an awful lot about each other, and that can only be good for Aston Martin as they seek to improve their form in the future.
Could, Scott, we see that form improve this weekend? Brilliant qualifying for both Aston Martins in Imola. Bit of an upgrade, understanding of the tyres. But I think Fernando Alonso described their car previously as dead in low-speed corners.
Yeah, that has been the main characterisation from both drivers, actually, this year. Slow-speed corners have been the weakness. And as Charles Leclerc has loved to point out for the last week, Monaco is all slow-speed corners. So that's where also he feels that Ferrari's been missing out. So in terms of what Aston Martin can do, obviously they're doing quite well at the moment, 9th and 10th on the leaderboard. It's very early in FP1 and they are still 2 seconds off the pace, so we can read very little into that. But actually Andy Cow, the team principal, I did ask him yesterday about the upgrade, and he said there are still some traits in the car that they don't like. They've added overall load, but there's still some things that aren't quite that nice about it, and I suspect that does relate to that low speed performance, which we'll probably see this weekend.
Well, let's see if they can work their way up the order. At the moment, Alonso's 9th, 1.8 seconds down, with Stroll running at the top 10. But it is early stages. Rosanna, what are your thoughts on the Aston Martin situation?
Whoa, sorry, just first up, just Yuki Tsunoda nearly losing it as he came towards me over the Armco, the pit lane. Wow, I've got an incredible vantage point as Lewis Hamilton, the Ferrari, goes past. I can look down, that was Oscar Piastri, you can see the driver input, and it's absolutely fascinating to be above the drivers. It's a very unique vantage point for me as a pit lane reporter to have that. But on the Aston Martin thing, maybe I'm reading too much into it, Harry, but we get sent this document from the FIA with the car presentations ahead of each session and each weekend. And in the Aston Martin part, it said more aggressive rear wing, more aggressive profiles for the front wing. And OK, that's circuit specific, but I like the use of aggressive. Is that an Adrian Newey influence, do you think, to be more aggressive? And maybe that will reap rewards, that aggressive approach.
Aggressive? Do we agree?
It's aggressive terminology to describe circuit-specific high downforce front rear wings. I think Adrian Newey is a bit more of a man of substance rather than going for style or shouting. He does his talking in other ways.
He certainly does. 40 minutes, 33 seconds remain. The two McLarens are currently quickest out there. Norris with a 1:13.6 on the soft tyre, 2/10 quicker than his teammate Oscar Piastri, but Max Verstappen pushing out of the final corner down the main straight now. That DRS Open on the hard tyre puts himself up into third, just over 2.5 tenths clear. This the sound of the other Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton, coming into Rascasse, but going a little bit deep, just looked a bit stiff, turning it into the right hand or over the hill at Antinogues, and then down the main straight once more on the medium tyre for Hamilton. 4 tenths adrift for the 7-time champion, as Oscar Piastri is now fastest driver out there, 1:13.5, a tenth between himself and teammate Lando Norris. And this is going to be the interesting dynamic going forward all throughout the year. And Andrew, you actually did a great sit down with Oscar Piastri, which you can read the full article on the BBC Sport website, or indeed listen to it on the latest Checkered Flag podcast preview show, which you can find on BBC Sounds. But for Oscar Piastri, Andrew, what did you learn about the Australian that perhaps maybe you didn't know before?
Well, I hope people will read the interview and enjoy it without me having to blab on about it too much on here. But I think that, I didn't learn a huge amount, but he was very eloquent. And I wanted to explore this idea of his calmness and coolness. Liam Lawson being blocked by somebody.
Hamilton.
Anyway, TV pictures that the radio audience can't hear. Lawson's radio.
I nearly had was it like brake right before the last corner.
Yeah, usual Hamilton stuff, that's okay.
And also, not just the coolness and the calmness, but the sort of paradox, if you like, the dichotomy between that and the fact that as a Formula 1 driver, obviously you need to have fire in you to drive to the limit and overtake. And I think one of the most interesting things he said was he thinks that one of the things that's been most notable about Oscar Piastri since he started in Formula 1 is his decisiveness and instinctiveness as a racer. He doesn't waste any energy when he's racing, in the same way that he doesn't really waste any energy with emotions fundamentally. If he goes for a pass only when it's really, really on, and saves himself a lot of time as a result, and his overtaking moves are they're exquisite in how clinical they are. And he was saying he thinks that there's a relationship between his personality and the way he goes racing. And he expressed it actually more eloquently than I could, which is a bit embarrassing because he's a race driver and I'm a writer, but there you are. It's all there in the interview.
But a cool customer, nonetheless.
Very much so.
Piastri.
I think actually, I'd be interested to hear what Scott thinks about this. I think Oscar Piastri is the coolest, as in most level-headed, not as in the man with no name, the coolest Formula 1 driver I think I've ever seen. Maybe only Mika Hakkinen is on the same level. Even Kimi Räikkönen, who everybody would say is the coolest, he got shouty on the radio and upset with people and swore. Nothing about that from Oscar Piastri. He's just completely flat, almost, and which is extraordinary considering the level of adrenaline. And I really do think he is just about the coolest customer that's ever been in Formula 1.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's the even keel that he can maintain, even in the most stressed of situations. You look at one of the things that's often said about Max Verstappen is obviously he is absolutely relentless and consistent, and he in certain situations doesn't look like he can be phased in the slightest, but he has a trigger point. He reaches a stage sometimes when he's losing control of races, sometimes when he feels like the team's underperforming or something like that, where it sort of pushes him over the edge. We've yet to see that from Piastri. He's dealt with most situations that you can have as a Formula 1 driver, and nothing's quite triggered him in that way so far.
Well, I think what's so impressive, at least for Zana, I don't know what you think as well, but the step up that Piastri has made this year and his capacity to kind of bank knowledge and improve as a result just seems to what maybe aids that level-headedness and keeps him a cut above the rest.
Yeah, I find it funny because this year we're like, oh my goodness, it's his third year and he's already leading the championship. Whereas last year we're like, oh, Oscar Piastri, it's his second year. He really should be performing. And it's mad what a few months can do, but such level-headedness. I used to present quite a lot with Oscar Piastri back in the day. He joined me for a post-race show and he was such a delight to work with. And he gave such clear, incisive analysis of the races that we just watched, all with the sort of issue hanging over his head that he hadn't graduated straight from F2 as the champion into F1. He had to have that year on the sidelines, and how frustrating must that have been, having to be a broadcaster for a year as well, rather than being in a car. And people are saying, gosh, is it bad to have a year away from racing? But my goodness me, it has not fazed him. So yeah, what a delight. So cool, so calm, and I just really love that. Harry, I'm just going to change the subject, because I'm standing outside Aston Martin, where Lance Stroll's car has been up on the highest jack for quite some time now, since everyone piled in during the red flag, which of course he and Charles Leclerc caused. I think perhaps more Stroll at fault there, but his car is being worked on, and watching the mechanics work on the car is Adrian Newey, standing leaning against a cabinet at the front of the garage, holding his notebook in his left hand. He is left-handed, so he's been scribbling down a few little pointers in his notebook as the mechanics have been working. He's just walking over now to the front left sort of caked in, having a little look at that, and the front suspension link up. Oh, interesting. He's really having a good close look at what's going on there, the front part of the car. So already thinking, ruminating. I can imagine there are ideas already in his brain about how he's going to turn the fortunes of this team around, but he's just peering over now, leaning over the Aston Martin car. Lance Stroll not in it, he's gone elsewhere, but Adrian Newey very much in the garage, and I'm sure already having an influence.
Yeah, well, not the way Lance Stroll would have wanted his free practice one session to go. The 26-year-old who's scored all of Aston Martin's points so far this season. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton jumping over the swimming pool chicane. Before you know it, he's into the braking zone of Raskas, the right-hander. So close to the wall, extracting every inch he can from the tarmac available. Fastest of anybody in the first sector, up on time in the middle, and the last sector sees him go almost 2/10 clear to the top on the medium tyre.
So one of the things I was going to say earlier, which we digressed from, was that was about the C6 tyre and how soft it was in Imola, and how a lot of the team, Aston Martin, benefited from running the medium tyre in qualifying last weekend, it seems. And there was speculation in Imola whether that super soft tyre in here would behave in a similar way here in Monaco and not be the quickest tyre over one lap. Fernando Alonso was saying he didn't actually think that would be the case when it came to it, because of the nature of the circuit here being very different and all slow speed, short duration corners. But we do have, don't we, Scott, quite a wide range of tyre choices in this first practice session, more than we would normally see. So we've got some people on soft, some people on medium, some people on hard, and because of the way Formula 1 tyre allocation and tyre choices work, what we're seeing here, we don't know how it's going to go yet, but we're seeing here the beginnings of race tyre strategy playing out already. Because you have to decide right now how you're going to plan to run the race, probably, because you've only got a certain allocation of tyres. It's 8 softs, 3 mediums and 2 hards. If you want to focus on the hard for the race, or the medium for the race, or even the soft for the race, you have to start planning that from now. And so we don't know how to develop it. It is developing right now. So McLaren, for example, are on the soft tyre. They might be thinking, that might be evidence of them thinking, well, we're going to focus on the medium tyre more. Whereas some of the teams are on hard and medium. So Verstappen's on the hard, for example, Hamilton on the medium. That's going to play out in a different way as well. I just mention that now, not because I'm making any fundamental point, but just because it's something to keep an eye on through the weekend.
Well, it's the two Red Bull teams, Williams, Alpine and Haas, are on the hards. Ferrari started with both cars on the mediums, but actually another consequence of that Leclerc-Stroll incident is that Leclerc's actually had to switch to a set of softs for the rest of the session. So that's burning a set earlier than they would have ideally wanted. I suspect that's not going to have a massive impact. We see here Gasly.
Yeah, these guys, what are they doing? Guys, gotta wake up, it's Monaco.
I mean, I sympathise with Gasly's experience into the chicane, but he could probably have been a little bit cooler on the exit, because he nearly caused an accident for himself, accelerating there in the way he did. But on Ferrari having to switch with Leclerc, so Hamilton and Leclerc are both right up there now, just over half a second slower than Lando Norris. But it's interesting that Hamilton's that quick on the medium versus Leclerc on the soft, to Andrew's point about earlier. But it is an intriguing split. I mean, normally what we can see in Monaco and expect, I think, later on for FP2 is a lot of qualifying focus and preparation. In fact, I remember here in 2021 Ferrari stealing an unlikely pole position with a slightly uncompetitive car, by virtue pretty much of the inherent strengths of that year's car, but also relentless preparation in terms of qualifying through Friday and Saturday practice. So who knows, maybe that's going to be their game plan today.
Yeah, that's what, track position so vital here. Charles Leclerc on that soft tyre, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, lost time in the first sector, lost time in the middle sector, but does improve and gets himself up into second, about 4/10 away. Official confirmation by talk of teams who were really putting in the effort to understanding these tyres. Well, Aston Martin were one of those who really put the emphasis in ahead of Imola and ahead of that great qualifying for them, and just official confirmation from Aston Martin that Lance Stroll's FP1 session is over due to rear suspension damage and a gearbox change following the contact with Charles Leclerc that brought out the red flag earlier. So we're down to 19 cars now in this session.
I smell brakes in here really bad.
Okay.
Liam Lawson, who peels into the pits after saying he smelled some brake, maybe with some brakes, perhaps getting a little bit too hot for the Racing Bulls' liking. Liam Lawson, who has had a tough season so far, I think it's fair to say. 2 12th places are his best finishes so far this year as he hits the stops in his pit box. And I just wonder, as we also have another look at Max Verstappen and an incident between Gabriel Bortoleto. So that was Verstappen approaching rapidly towards the swimming pool chicane and then coming across a slow-moving Sauber of Gabriel Bortoleto. Those two very good friends off the track, but actually nearly coming together on the track. That incident has been noted.
That was a case of Verstappen catching the Sauber, not just physically on the track, but also visually as well. The worst possible point where he really wants to commit to the corner and gets caught out. And there's a moment where you basically have to decide what you're going to avoid or crash into, basically, which is why it's not as simple as Verstappen, slowing down and taking the corner. He has the moment as well and goes across the runoff. Right about Bortoleto and Verstappen, I think there's a bit of banter between the two of them in the press conference where Verstappen was giving Bortoleto a little bit of grief for his inability to match his lap times in sim racing online. The Max, I suspect that, to be fair, there's quite a lot of drivers, both in reality and in the virtual world, that struggle to match Max Verstappen. He's quite a unique double threat as a 4-time Formula 1 world champion and an absolutely renowned sim racer.
It certainly is. Well, let's hope a little bit of incident on track doesn't scupper their friendship there. Bortoleto currently down at 18th. Max Verstappen up in 6th. 28 minutes and 0 seconds remain. It's Norris fastest with a 1:12.2, just over 4/10 clear of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Then it's Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, the top 5. Then comes Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Gasly, Tsunoda's inside the top 10. And it's Isaac Hadjar ahead of Nico Hülkenberg in 12th. Albon is 13th, ahead of the 2 Haas cars of Behrman and Ocon. Antonelli's on a lap at the moment, just coming out of the tunnel, is 16th. Then it's Lawson, Bortoleto, Colapinto and Lance Stroll, 20th and last out of this session, though, with the damage sustained from his clash with Charles Leclerc early stages. But Kimi Antonelli on the rails coming through the swimming pool chicane.
Obviously, with Stroll being out of the remainder of this session, so Colapinto's the slowest of the cars that are still running and going to set a time. He's 2.8 seconds off. He's on the hard tyre, so he's not going to be pulling up trees in the Alpine, which is a difficult car to pull up trees in anyway. Pierre Gasly's doing a better job inside the top 10 on the hards, but this is a tricky session for Colapinto to manage. He obviously had that heavy crash in qualifying on his first weekend for Alpine last year, and he was talking yesterday about the need to kind of feel his way into it. I think Yuki Tsunoda's in a similar position after his Imola qualifying shunt. This is not the kind of track to arrive to short of confidence or knowledge or understanding of your car. That's probably where Colapinto and Tsunoda are both at.
We are nowhere. Car is right corner super understeer, left corner super oversteer.
Charles Leclerc then, full of optimism ahead of the rest of the weekend, makes his way.
That is when he says nowhere, he's not wrong there. You shouldn't have a car that handles completely differently between one type of corner and another.
I guess it's possible there might be a little bit of residual damage on the front end from maybe something underlying beyond the front wing. Yeah. I mean, that would be the only obvious one. There's a Williams down the escape road, Carlos Sainz reversing out. That's Sandoval, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I was just going to make a remark about Colapinto. I mean, it's worth mentioning that Flavio Briatore, the executive advisor and de facto team boss of Alpine, had said before Imola All he has to do is go fast and not crash. And I think
score points.
That was a quite pointed remark, because actually what happened last year when Colapinto was drafted into Williams in place of Logan Sargent is that he looked very impressive very quickly, and there was a little bit of circumstance in that. So he out-qualified Alex Albon, his teammate, in his second race in Azerbaijan, but actually that was because Albon didn't get his second qualifying run because some stuff got stuck in the car. And so everybody thought, oh, this guy's really mega, and loads of people got interested in him. But then, as the season went on, he started crashing. He had 2 crashes in one weekend in the wet in Brazil, and then another one in qualifying in Las Vegas. And he ended the year with his reputation quite badly damaged as a result. And actually, Alpine, who'd gone from really keen to sign him at one point, then weren't keen to sign him, but then decided that they were keen after all in the winter. So he he has to rebuild that reputation, basically, and he's got 5 races to do it, although Briatore basically rejected that idea, even though the team said it in a statement.
And Briatore was quoted as saying it as well.
Yeah, this just goes to show how much he actually said of the statement that he was quoted as saying by Alpine. Anyway, he needs to rescue that reputation, and he's not going to do it by binning it in his first qualifying session. And Monaco, as you said, Scott, is absolutely the wrong track for him to be coming to after that, because the thing about Monaco is not only is it absolutely merciless in punishing mistakes, and you have to build up to it slowly, but the thing is, if you don't properly commit here and shave the barriers and really risk everything, you're nowhere, more so probably than at any other track. So it's a really difficult spot for him to be in.
And it's not as easy as just build up and you can expect to be there by qualifying to get to that point, as Andrew mentions, where you're taking every millimetre of track and maybe even grazing the barrier as much as it allows. You have to be there by FP3 pretty much. And we just saw an image of Kimi Antonelli, who's 14th at the moment in the Mercedes. He's talked about this a couple of times this season. He gave Suzuka as another track where confidence is key and the driver can make a difference. We saw Max Verstappen with the pole and the win there. Antonelli said that in hindsight he regrets that kind of careful approach of I'm just going to build up because this is a track that'll bite me, because he gave himself way too much to do come qualifying. So that balancing act of trying to work out how much do you give yourself to do, how hard do you push, it's quite hard to strike, as Lando Norris has just found at the first corner.
And actually this is interesting in the subject of Oscar Piastri, because in the sort of research for the interview that I did yesterday, I spoke to Zach Brown. I didn't end up using very many of Brown's quotes in the interview, but one of the things Zach said about why Piastri had made this step forward from last year to this is that he got to the limit sooner in the weekend. So last year Brown felt that he was arriving at qualifying and didn't quite know what the limit really was, but this year he's brought that much earlier forward in the weekend, so he's getting there on the Friday, and obviously that's probably partly to do with experience. But it's interesting to hear Zach talk about that as a step forward. I got slightly distracted in my answer there, by the way, because I looked to my left and I saw that Damon Hill's turned up. Hi, Damon. He's commentating with us for the rest of the weekend. He's just popped in to watch P1 with us. So there you are. Nice to have him here.
We will have the 1996 World Champion joining us from Saturday onwards, so look forward to that. But for now, we have Andrew Benson and Scott Mitchell-Martin in the hot seats from the race. I just want to talk actually about Williams. I think they deserve a little bit of light, really. As Alex Albon just got a bit of traffic though from Lando Norris in the McLaren coming out of the exit of the swing pool chicane. Norris desperately trying to get out of the way as soon as he could, but Albon, carrying so much more pace, manages to survive it round the final corner. Sainz just went up to third fastest. Where's Albon gone? He's now up inside the top 5. I mean, Scott, how impressed have you been with Williams? Is this the resurgence we've all been talking about and hoping for the last few years from them?
I think it's the first. Isaac Hadjar has had he's clipped the wall on the right hand side.
Yeah, boxing.
Oh,
Quite a big hit with the rail.
That's the quintessential Monaco push lap mistake, isn't it? The one that ended in disaster for Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen in the past. But coming back to Williams, I think it's more that it's the first. I think it's the first public manifestation of the progress that's actually been going on now for a few years. And as James Vowles, their team principal, will admit himself, it looks a bit more of a dramatic step from last year than is in reality, because last year they underperformed. They had a faster car than finishing ninth in the championship would have you believe. And there were times last year where the Williams was the fifth fastest car, sixth fastest car. There were times when it was the ninth fastest car, or even the slowest. But they actually got into quite a good place developmentally over the last sort of 12-15 months, and they're kind of cashed in on all of that now. Add on to that the fact that they've got two fantastic drivers in Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. Vals regularly refers to them as world-class drivers, and both of them up there at the moment, 4th and 6th. And the last few weekends, now that Sainz has found his feet more at Williams, they've been pushing each other along really, really strongly. And that sort of Ferrari beating pace of the last couple of weekends at times, Vals is adamant that they wouldn't be in that position without these two drivers. They just nudge each other up as the race weekend goes on, which actually could be quite a critical element here.
3 top 5 finishes for Alex Albon so far this year, just off the back of back-to-back top 5 finishes. Maybe could have even been a little bit more in Imola if it had played out slightly differently. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz continuing to find his feet with that team. 4 points finishes so far, 2 8th place finishes, and arguably he could have had some more points on the board if strategy had worked out a little better for him, particularly in Imola and Miami as well for Carlos Sainz. But it does seem that there is momentum around that team. We know they've been working towards 2026 in particular and enjoying the benefits that is also bringing for this year with James Vowles really doing a complete turnaround from the bottom, from the facilities all the way to the top to the driver pairings.
Well, the way that they're talking about 2026, and Vowles said this I think back in as early as Saudi Arabia which was in April, talking about how all the focus is already on 2026, no active development in the wind tunnel or on CFD on this car. They'll still do a few things I guess that have been in the works for a while, or things that don't require using up that development allowance, but it's all on 2026, and that's actually caught the attention of a couple of bigger teams. George Russell recently was talking about how you can't rule out Williams being a bit of a dark horse for next season in terms of making a step and emerging as one of the top teams, maybe the team to beat. Russell seemed to be paying attention to the fact that Vowles had said that they were all in on 2026, so I think they've got the right plan, and they're finally taking some of the key steps you need to take along that journey to put it into actual action.
Well, one of the bonuses that they have that might make that actually happen is the Mercedes engine, of course. People remember when the yellow flag out on the track.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why. I'll just finish this point until we see an accident.
Alex Albon, I think, was stopped briefly.
So when the engine regulations changed the last time in 2014, Mercedes stole a march on the entire field and had a huge performance advantage. And Williams actually were one of the teams that benefited from that. People might remember that Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa, their drivers, were quite often featuring at the front of the grid. They came close to winning actually in Austria that year, and that was all to do with the Mercedes engine. It wasn't really that they made a huge step forward with their car at that point. And if the word on the street in the paddock at the moment is that Mercedes are again in front on engine development. I don't know exactly how everybody knows this, but it seems like an accepted truth. And I think numbers leak out basically at areas. The FIA know the numbers that the engines have got, for example, although they're supposed to keep it secret, but everyone knows each other in Formula One. Engineers talk to each other. Numbers get bandied around, and it seems to be an accepted fact that Mercedes are in front, at least now, and that actually the fact that Red Bull and Ferrari are behind is partly to explain why they were supporting this slightly madcap idea of a return to V10 engines that Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, was pushing and then got pushed back on earlier this season. So if Williams make the step forward that they've made this year with their car and continue that into 26 and have the best engine next year, they really could be really close to the front, along with obviously the other Mercedes engine teams, Mercedes and McLaren.
Is it fair to say, Scott, that Alex Albon has surprised this year?
I think there will be a few people who perhaps didn't appreciate that Alex was as fast as he is. Part of that is, unfortunately for him, a legacy of the fact that obviously when he was at Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen, he was battered, and it left a mark on him, both in himself and in his reputation, but also the fact that who his teammates have been for the last few years, and Sainz coming on board just gives you a proper reference because...
Oh, that was Lewis Hamilton.
These guys are going slow there.
Coming up through Massenet into Casino Square, that was Hamilton through the left-hander, and then just cars to his right, cars to his left, having to thread the needle there. That could have been a big shunt.
A precursor to Q1, I think, where you're just going to have cars appearing out of nowhere very, very suddenly. But just to finish the point on Albon, I think Sainz gives him the reference, someone who compared so well to Charles Leclerc to Lando Norris to Verstappen when they were teammates at the very start in Formula 1 at Toro Rosso. And I think Sainz and Albon will benefit from each other, but just reputationally, I think Albon gets a big boost from what he's done so far this year. I think he's had an excellent 2025 season so far.
15 minutes and 27 seconds remain of free practice 1 here in Monaco. Oscar Piastri's just come on the radio and saying he's hit the wall, but he's made it back to the pits, and the car has stopped outside the garage while the team check it over, and they have indeed released him back into the fast lane. So clearly not too much, or if any, damage picked up by the man who leads the charge in the Drivers' Championship. Just 13 points splitting him and his teammate.
For your info, front left is gone. I think there's something wrong with the car.
Copy.
So Charles Leclerc thinks something is wrong with the car. The front left of the soft tyre, the red-walled rubber that he is running, is gone. Leclerc is fastest with a 1:11.964. We are seeing all the drivers going out there on the different compounder tyre available to them. The C4 hard, the C5 medium and the C6 soft, the same as what we had last weekend in Imola. Pirelli bringing that step softer in the compound to try and, well, initially spice up the strategies for a circuit like this, though. Well, we're doing that as Verstappen gets oh so close to the wall coming through Casino Square, has a little twitch on the front end and has to navigate all of the traffic available to him, making his way down through the hairpin.
There's a lot of cars that are now on the softs, so I think we are, now that the track's rubbered in, we're getting nicely into lots and lots of qualifying simulation territory. So Leclerc is still fastest on the soft. I asked him yesterday in the press conference, because he's been talking so much about this slow speed weakness for Ferrari, that this track only being slow speed has been the reason he fears it, but it could also potentially be what allows Ferrari to get more out of their car, because they don't have to worry about running the car a certain way that then biases medium speed or high speed corners and then causes compromises that they otherwise have to live with at slow speed. So it could be that we get some of that goodness back in the Ferrari that we've seen at tracks like this in the past, and we see the best of the car and the best of Leclerc. It's certainly a more encouraging start than it looked when he went into the back of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin.
Yes, not the best of starts. How much of Ferrari pinning on this technical directive change for the stiffening of the front wings, which is happening in Barcelona?
Well, Fred Vasseur, the team boss, says that everyone's going to have a new front wing, and he's expecting a reset of the field. I don't know, but I suspect Vasseur's going to be disappointed. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. Everybody's front wing is flexing at the moment, so if they all have to flex a bit less, which it seems that they will have to, why would it necessarily affect one team more than another? And quite often these technical directives don't make very much difference at all, even though people think that they will. A lot of people are fixating on aspects, particularly Red Bull, I have to say, are fixating on specific aspects of the McLaren car as an explanation for why it's performing so well, particularly in races, and particularly in some aspects of races, which is rear tyre temperature control management, effectively. But with all of these things, it's very, very rarely one thing that makes the difference. And I think people seem to be forgetting that over the winter, McLaren made some really significant changes to the design of their car, particularly around the front suspension and the way it performs on anti-dive, which is the way the car pitches on the entry to a corner. And I suspect that is much more influential on its race performance in those aspects than anything to do with fancy brake cooling drums or flexible front wings or whatever.
And there are no free lunches in Formula 1, so when they make that change and they potentially get certain benefits to the car, it comes with certain drawbacks as well, and that is one of the reasons we have seen Lando Norris in particular this year have those difficulties, those little errors. We've seen him have a couple of moments even in this session under braking. One of the likely consequences of the front suspension change that Andrew's just mentioned is a little bit less feel through the front axle. The drivers have talked about this. Andrea Stella, the team principal, has talked about this. It's a bit more numb, the feeling that they get from the front end. The way that Norris tends to drive naturally asks a little bit more of the front end, and I think he therefore takes it to a point where he kind of crosses the threshold of what will instigate a problem in the car in doing that, whether it's a lock-up, whether it's a bit of understeer or whatever. Piastri doesn't quite take it that far, and I think that's why you see sometimes already this season, when Norris hits his peak, he is actually fractionally faster than Piastri, but Piastri is hitting his own peak so consistently, he's ahead more often than not, and that's why he's in the lead of the championship.
This is the sound of the man who leads the championship as he's braking downhill towards the Nouvelle chicane. Was that where we heard him on the radio earlier go, I think I hit the wall? Was it the rear left tyre? Just making contact with that inside barrier as you head downhill braking, then turn it through the left. Live to fight another day on that one, did Oscar Piastri, with 10 minutes and 25, 24, 23 seconds remain as the sun continues to beat down on the Principality. It is Charles Leclerc on home soil, who is currently fastest with a 1:11.9 on that soft tyre, but is far from happy with where his Ferrari is at, already starting the session, going into the back of Lance Stroll and breaking his front wing. Stroll out of the session as a result. Lando Norris is second at the moment, 3/10 drift, also on that soft tyre. Oscar Piastri on the medium tyre in third, with Sainz and Albon, the two Williams cars rounding out the top five. Verstappen sixth ahead of Hamilton, and it's George Russell who's out there at the moment, along with his teammate Kimi Antonelli. It's Russell in eighth. Alonso's up there in the top 10, now joined by Pierre Gasly's Alpine. Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, Behrman, Hadjar and Antonelli make up the top 15, with Liam Lawson in 16th ahead of Colapinto. Esteban Ocon is 18th and Gabriel Borsaletto 19th. Stroll in 20th, but as I say, no longer in this session, as George Russell will be next to come to the line and puts himself up into fourth.
So the two Red Bulls, I think, are now on push laps on the soft tyre. Verstappen's about to go quicker, maybe not quite quickest. And Tsunoda is a bit behind him on track and a bit behind him in lap time already after the first sector. We talked about Tsunoda very briefly earlier, mentioned the Imola crash and the situation he's in. Verstappen isn't going to go quickest, 3/10 off of Leclerc. That margin from Leclerc is quite impressive. I mean, we don't know obviously what they're doing on fuel and engine modes, but for a driver who was dreading his home race, he's 3/10 to the good at the moment in FP3. Hamilton's got traffic again.
Oh, he's hit the wall and bounced over the chicane at the swimming pool.
Mate, traffic. At the box, mate. I've just gone completely over curb, mate.
Oh, that was a bumpy ride for Lewis Hamilton. Turned in slightly too early at the swimming pool chicane, hits the inside barrier, bails out of it, and then gets leapfrogged over the yellow sausage curb that makes up that chicane.
He's really lucky not to have hit the wall there, because that, as Scott eloquently said earlier, that's the quintessential Monaco incident. You turn in too early because you anticipate more understeer than you get, and you hit the inside barrier at that second chicane, and then you either bounce over the curbs into the barrier or just go straight into the barrier. He bounced over the curbs, but somehow avoided the barrier.
I'm just looking at Lewis Hamilton's car being checked out by the mechanics. I think they're just making a little front wing adjust, but one of the mechanics had his hand sort of through the gap between the front left tyre and the front wing, just having a little look, I'm sure, to check there's no damage. And the garages are so small here, it's so difficult to see in. Some of my colleagues up and down the pit lane have got sort of little mini binoculars, if you will, to see what's going on, because we have to stand behind the Armco, which gives us a lovely viewpoint of the cars flying down into Raskas, but it means we're a bit far away from what's going on. But lots of mechanics standing around Lewis's car. He's still in the car, but they'll just want to be sure that he didn't pick up any damage from that bump.
We've got eyes on you from the commentary box, Rosanna, that's for sure. In prime position outside the Ferrari garage. Thank you very much, Rosanna Tedden. He is back in the garage. 7 minutes to the exact time that we have left of FP1. Scott, you were going to talk about Yuki Tsunoda briefly. We did speak about him off the back of, I suppose, a similar Colapinto-esque crash coming to Monaco. Tsunoda's one, though, was rather hefty. And I think that's actually put him on the back foot with terms of the specification he's got to run this weekend.
Yes, so Red Bull's being a little bit coy, and Tsunoda wasn't sure exactly what he was able to say yesterday in terms of exactly what it is. I think the best way to characterise it is he's on an older spec floor.
Okay.
They also had some other changes at Imola around some bodywork and also brake ducts. Verstappen had, but even at Imola, Tsunoda was a bit cryptic about what he may or may not have had. I don't think he was due to be on the same specification even for Imola before the crash. So he's definitely light on something here. He didn't finish that soft tyre lap. I think he bailed out of it in the final sector. So he's still 1.3 seconds off the pace and a second behind Max. He's obviously going to need to get a lot closer than that come qualifying tomorrow. But he said yesterday he will be basically taking it very easy in FP1. The track evolution here is massive, especially through the first session. Remember that first Leclerc lock-up and trip down the escape road when he was basically dawdling around the first sector. So I think Tsunoda's got quite a lot of work to do. I don't feel like he's coming under pressure internally at Red Bull at the moment. It's been a quiet start to time as Verstappen's teammate. A little bit disappointing. The results aren't what he was signed for, but all you can say about it is it's still an improvement on what came before him. I know Liam Lawson only got those 2 races, but he didn't look like scoring points at all, and Tsunoda's only got 7, but he's at least been closer to what Red Bull have needed, but he needs to start turning that into a bit more.
Let's not beat about the bush, Scott. If he carries on like this, he's out at the end of the year, and that's the end of his Formula 1 career. It's as simple as that. He has to improve a lot to stop that happening to him at the end of this season. I
would agree with that by the end of the year, but I think...
Yeah, I think he'll survive the year,
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. I don't think he's, 3 or 4 races. We're coming to summer break territory, which is prime Red Bull. Are they going to swap their drivers in some way?
They haven't got many more options. I mean, Isaac Hadjar's performing quite well at the moment, and I almost want to say, just dial it back a bit, Hadjar, because are you sure you want to go in that top seat?
There was a point when they were going to swap Lawson, obviously, that Helmut Marko made a remark about Hadjar. You thought, Helmut, don't, not after 2 races. No,
leave him be.
I mean, I'm enjoying Hadjar as an addition to the F1 grid. He's been brilliantly quick at times. He's also got... He's a bit box office as well in the way that he, how emotional he is. Speaking of Red Bull and Tsunoda.
Coming through the Nouvelle Chicane, just struggling to get on the power, bumping over the inside curb as well, which sends that Red Bull up on all 4 wheels. Bit of air, correction to the wheel, and that's not how you find the time around this Monte Carlo circuit. Tsunoda at the moment currently down the times in 14th. 1.2 seconds off his teammate Max Verstappen up in 2nd, and in the sister team Isaac Hadjar, well, he's currently in 13th place. He's ahead of a Liam Lawson, but you have to say I've been impressed with Hadjar almost out of all the rookies. I mean, Antonelli has performed well, so too has Ollie Behrman, but Hadjar, I think maybe because he was the last driver signed for the year, and it almost felt like he was signed because Red Bull were taking ages to make up their mind between Lawson and Tsunoda, and then as a result, Hadjar's next, 2nd in F2, there you go.
It reminded me a little bit of how Pierre Gasly got into F1, which is almost like Red Bull felt reluctant to put the guy in the car. And don't forget, it needed them to drop Sergio Perez and have that chain reaction that then created a vacancy at the 2nd team. Hadjar wasn't walking into that seat. Something needed to happen for him to get it. But he's been, ever since, the way he's rebounded from that formation lap crash in the wet in Melbourne has been absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, it's a rare occasion where you say, I hope the guy doesn't get the promotion to the top team, because he's on a really nice trajectory at the moment. And I should point out, I think he has, since they did the swap and Tsunoda came out of that team and went to Red Bull Racing, I think Tsunoda and Hadjar have scored the same number of points in those 5 events since then. So Hadjar has been doing well, and Lawson obviously is still pointless this season. So Hadjar's probably the 2nd best performing Red Bull driver behind Verstappen.
Well, what do you say about Lawson, though? His qualifying head-to-heads with Isaac Hadjar, 4-1 in the Frenchman's favour, beaten 5-0 hands down in their race head-to-heads. Part of the reason for the demotion of Lawson was Billy wasn't cutting it in the top team, but rather than just to cut his career altogether, they were hoping that would give him the time and space and the familiarity to recover. But when does that question rear its head again, if it hasn't already?
Well, I think they are trending towards having another driver problem. It'll only get harder for Lawson when Arvid Lindblad, the Red Bull Junior, who is a Formula 2 race winner already, and...
That guy.
Yeah, copy that. Wasn't very nice.
I think that was Tsunoda getting caught behind Esteban Ocon, both gearing up for, a lap. Tsunoda trying to finish his, and Ocon gearing up over at Anthony Noakes, and Tsunoda not very happy with Ocon.
No, and despite his best efforts and genuine improvement in how he expresses his feelings over the radio, I'm completely justified there with that annoyance. But yeah, Lawson coming under pressure from Lindblad. He's a super license he's eligible for in the summer break. He's safe until then because there isn't anyone else to put in the car, but he can't have a Red Bull racing future. Red Bull have demoted drivers before but never put them back in that car, so I'd be amazed if he ever ends up as an option back there again. And it feels like if he doesn't get on top of it sooner rather than later, he will be looking at pressure to stay in Formula One, even at the second team. You know, Tsunoda's got definitely until the end of the season. I'd be stunned if that changes. But with Lawson, who knows? Because if they think Lindblad's the future, they're going to want to try and check him out in Formula One, aren't they?
Lawson with not too much experience around this track either, recent experience. Last time he raced it was back in 2022, finished 8th in the F2 sprint race. The others, Hadjar, Bortoleto, Behrman, Antonelli, all raced here last year in Formula 2, so have some good experience here. It's a rather busy weekend with F2, F3 and the Porsches all racing around in between the Formula 1 cars, but we are just 5 seconds away then from the checkered flag falling on this first practice session, and certainly a lot of learning to be done up and down the field as we try and understand how the strategy might unfold on Sunday, with a mandatory 2 pit stop movement being made, each driver having to use 3 sets of tyres, 2 different compounds as the rules require. Charles Leclerc fastest at the end of this session. George Russell though still making his way round. Under the radar, George Russell, or actually is that wrong? I feel like a lot of people have been saying he's been under the radar, but he's picking up the podiums here, there, he's performing well. Where is he in the Drivers' Championship at the moment? Top 4. He's having a brilliant season.
It's hard to think of a result that Russell's left on the table, whether there was a better position he could have finished in any of the Grand Prix, really. It's kind of, he's been at the upper end, really, of what the Mercedes has been capable of. The last 2 or 3 events have been a lot more difficult for them in terms of race pace and tyre management. And he's opportunistically managed to grab good results even within that run, but he's just doing what the car can manage. And in that session in particular, you know, he's still 3 tenths quicker than Kimi Antonelli, I think, in P6, so he's there or thereabouts for what Mercedes can expect.
Bortoleto just having a moment down at Saint-Devote, running into that runoff area, reversing and then getting himself back onto the track, and that'll be a case of a simple snatch of the front right. This is the sound of the Brazilian driver, the reigning Formula 2 champion, into the braking zone. And actually, no, just having to hit that brake, going too much speed into the corner.
It's after the checkered flag as well.
Indeed it is. So still trying to send it round Saint-Devote, but at the end of free practice 1, well, despite a crash at the start and constant complaining, pessimism throughout, it's Charles Leclerc who's fastest by a tenth of a second over that, 10.5 of a second to Max Verstappen, both on that soft tyre. Lando Norris on the medium finishing 3rd. Alex Albon for Williams up inside the top 4.
That was the busiest FP1 of my life.
The busiest FP1 of Isaac Hadjar's life. I think a nicely summed up message which just highlights the nature of threading cars around this just over 3.3 kilometre track. Alex Albon 4th, Oscar Piastri the top 5, George Russell 6th ahead of Sainz, Gasly, Hamilton and Alonso rounded out the top 10. Kimi Antonelli 11th ahead of Nico Hulkenberg, Sauber. Hadjar came 13th ahead of Tsunoda. Behrman rounding out the top 15. Ocon, Lawson, Bortoleto and Franco Colapinto 19th. Lance Stroll having been hit in the rear by Charles Leclerc. Unfortunately couldn't get back out for this session. Rosanna Tennant, a lot of thoughts up and down the pit lane in the next couple of hours before we go to FP2.
Yeah, I think the Monegasque fans and the Ferrari fans, who I can see opposite me in the grandstand, will be thrilled with that. Charles Leclerc picking up from where he left off this time last year, obviously winning the Monaco Grand Prix last time. But it just shows, doesn't it? Even the most experienced drivers can trip up here.
Yeah, checker flag has just gone, and well, despite a crash at the start of the session and a lot of complaints on team radio, it's the Monegasque, Charles Leclerc, who ends up fastest at the end of FP1 ahead of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, the top 3. Lewis Hamilton had a big moment earlier in the session as well, skating over the swimming pool chicane, hitting the wall slightly at 2. He was able to make his way back to the pits for the car to be checked over. He finished inside the top 9, but lots of learning to be done ahead of Sunday's Grand Prix, which will see for the first time 2 mandatory pit stops. Well, we are just a few minutes away then from concluding our coverage. Sorry, Rosanna, I had to cut you off there. 5 Live beckons and 5 Live gets what it wants. But impressive then for, well, the 19 drivers, all to survive the session. What's caught your eye at the end of FP1, Scott Mitchell, Mom?
I'm impressed by what Leclerc's done in the Ferrari. He did say earlier, when it comes to his concerns for this race, the possibility that they only need to dial the car into slow speed corners could bring back some of the strengths that we've seen in that car, not just in past years. You know, Leclerc, Kimi Antonelli's had a wall touch in that session that we missed. Touched the wall at turn 3, just the left-hander, as they sort of hit that crest, and again, trying to build up and get those final millimetres. It's gone a bit far there, but sometimes you only work out where the limit is by going beyond it. But just on Leclerc, he talked about the limitations of the car. It looks like they've got it back in a happier window so far.
Well, let's see what happens. We'll be back at 4 o'clock for the green light for free practice 2 in a couple of hours' time. Lots of learnings to be done ahead of a really intriguing weekend of racing here at the Principality. But from Monaco, we'll hand you back to Kevin Howes and the cricket team.
Thank you very much. Yeah, by the way, the Checker Flag podcast is absolutely brilliant. And last night, between 8 o'clock and 9 over on 5 Live, there's a terrific hour of looking ahead to Monaco, and really enjoyed that very much. And you get to find out that Harry has a hard life on yacht parties and things like that. But aside from that, some really good stuff. And you get that wherever you get your podcasts, as indeed you can for the Test Match Special podcast as well.